Hi, the Greater Bowie Chamber of Commerce is pleased to bring you the Bowie Business Journal, where we showcase its members and their services. Today we're doing part 2 with Darrell Carrington, who is the founding managing director of Carrington Associates. Last week we were talking about, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you for having me again.
Last week we just got into barely scratched the surface of medical cannabis and the growth and processing and selling, dispensaries, and so we started talking about jobs. Folks, if you missed last week, please tune in and watch that. Tape this one and watch the first half so that you're with us and following the whole history.
Well, and thank you again for having me on for this important topic, especially because, you know, as our residents see a new business come here and, you know, they're still uncertain. Now, this program has been around for years, but because people actually see it operating now and see it running, they're really curious as to what's going on in their communities.
And because marijuana has in the past had such a bad rap, that we're trying to make people not be afraid and make people aware that this is really something that can help people in so many ways, with pain, with physical ailments. It's not just a pain killer. And so we're trying to make people aware that there are so many uses. Your heart breaks when you see children who are having seizures and there's something that can help them, and yet parents have to in the past get illegal substances because and chance getting arrested because they're
and when I mean, as a parent, children. You know, as you're a parent, I'm a parent,
yeah.
You would do anything for your child, anything, especially if they're suffering, yes. And you know that there's a way that you can end their suffering. And that's what we also want folks to understand, is that this isn't, you know, as you were saying, this isn't your father's medical cannabis. You know, this isn't the 60s version. We're talking about scientists that are in labs right now trying to figure out how they can remove some strains of cannabis might make you a little bit paranoid. So how can we take out the paranoia, but still attack the fact that you need to, you know, so that, you know, increase your appetite at the same time that we reduce the paranoia, or something that specifically is focusing in on some aspect of pain that you have.
Do you know, I never thought of that about the appetite, because, you know, elderly people have a tendency to waste away because they just lose their appetite.
As a matter of fact, the name of our program in Maryland is the Natalie M. Laprade Medical Cannabis Commission. And the reason why it's named after her, she was the mother of Delegate Cheryl Glenn. And she had cancer, and unfortunately she passed. But Delegate Glenn, who is no fan of drugs, a very religious woman, but she saw what happened with her mom, and she said, if my mother could have had medical cannabis available to her, you know, it wouldn't have saved her life, but I wouldn't have watched her waste away. And then a few years after that, she had a brother-in-law, I believe, who also had a similar bout with cancer, and watched him go from a very strong and healthy man to a very frail one. And experiences such as that really change you. My own personal experiences with my mother, whose very good friend had cancer, and she had breast cancer. This is back in the 70s. And if you knew my mother, she's passed, but if you knew my mother, she was a holy roller. She had nothing to do with drugs or anything bad, but when she witnessed her friend's husband was a doctor, get her medical cannabis, and watched her at least be able to eat and not be in pain every time she talked with her, it really changed her opinion about medicine. My mother was a nurse. And, you know, so you fast forward to, you know, a few years ago when I had the opportunity to work on this, I jumped in. I thought it was something that would be beneficial to society. And I really feel firmly, I mean, I look at the opioid crisis that we have in our country, and it's obscene to me that we're not saying, okay, we have to like halt. I mean, like stop opioid use. I mean, immediately, and if there's anything that we can offer folks cannabis in place of opioids, we should immediately be doing it. I mean, it should almost be automatic. But again, we don't do enough research in this country, because of federal law to have that happen. I'm encouraged that there are some bills working their way through Congress and a lot of conversation now that we have a new diverse Congress where people are taking a hard look at the failed war on drugs and what we're doing with our current policy and how it doesn't line up properly with our healthcare needs for the future.
Right.
I mean, this is unsustainable. We can't afford the money that we pay for opioids either.
That's a whole other show, our failed war on drugs. That really is a whole other show. But to get back to the processing now, because I'm so in tune to the jobs that this can bring to our state, and then I was surprised about the trucks. I didn't realize that,
we have to transport, and not only that, but for the end user, you have to store your cannabis in something. So if you go and you purchase 30 grams of cannabis, 5 grams of 6 different strains, because you're using something that's let's say you need something in the morning when you first get up and you still have to do some work-related things, so you do a sativa so that it's more of a mind high, but it still affects your symptoms that you need. And then maybe in the afternoon, you're doing a hybrid between the sativa and the indica, so it gives you a lighter mood, but it's more concentrated on the pain that you experience in the middle of the day.
Is that what they're advertising on TV?
Advertising on TV, you probably see as CBD oils.
Well, they say those names, indica.
Well, there's only 3. Basically, there's only 3. You have indica, sativa, and hybrids. So, indica, think of more of the old, it's the stereotype of the old hippie sitting on the couch watching TV, eating Doritos. That's the effect that people think of with a heavy indica.
Okay.
With a dominant sativa, that's more of, people think of that as more as sunrise, waking up. So that's more of a more cerebral type of a high that you would get from the THC from a sativa.
Okay.
And then, of course, the hybrids being you can have a sativa dominant hybrid or an indica dominant hybrid or something that's 50-50.
So that's why your doctor comes in and says, this is how you need to
And your doctor may not know which strains you should know. They'll know what conditions you have, and that cannabis can help relieve it. It's going to be the professionals at your dispensary that are going to be able to let you know this strain, like, white willow is good for this, or if you have trouble sleeping, you should try cherry pie. If you need that get up and go in the morning, maybe it's Area 51. So there are specific strains that people know by reputation now that are certain things. So I mentioned cherry pie. That's something that's everyone knows that's a very indica dominant strain, and that's something that's really good for people who have insomnia. It's been tested, and the industry notes and the like suggest that this has been very, very good for people who suffer with insomnia and other sleep disorders. So those in the know those things, and every one of the dispensaries across the state of Maryland are staffed with professionals that actually know what, as a patient comes in, they do a consultation with them.
So you can't work in a dispensary unless you've had some real extensive training.
No one gets a job without going through an extensive FBI background check. You're fingerprinted. Yeah. And then, of course, you're trained, and you're trained in your specific job title, whatever that is. But your training is based upon the SOPs that you submitted to the state. The state has to approve your standard operating procedures before you become a operating business. Wow. And you use those SOPs to train your staff. And all staff that work with my companies anyway, have to be trained before they start working in any of our businesses. Yeah. Wow. So the safety and security for the patient is paramount. Making sure they have a safe and reliable product. and of course making sure the safety and security of the surrounding communities in which these businesses are going to operate is taken into consideration. I'll also add that, for the companies that I've worked with directly, we always have what we call community benefit agreements, in which we'll go into a community and we'll make sure that we do local hiring preferences. We will work first with the vendors in that particular area. Now, obviously, if we can't obtain something that we need from the local vendors, then we'll have to go outside. But we also try to do that very strategically. So we'll go one town out, then we'll go another town out. So we try to stay within that region so that the economic benefit stays at home.
Now, are you doing random, the people who, that sell the dispensaries, do they do medical, not medical, random drug?
We do drug testing of all of our agents.
Yeah.
When they're initially in, and every company across the state of Maryland has their own drug policy in place, and it's adhered to very strictly. Of course, if you are a patient, then that's up to your employer how they will choose. You have some employers that have a zero tolerance policy in their workplace, and you have other employers that look at the same way and saying, well, if you had diabetes, I wouldn't say you couldn't have insulin while you were working.
Right.
So if you have chronic pain, and then you need to take your gummy bear in the morning or whatever it is that you do, and it doesn't affect your work.
So this is all given to you in food form?
No, it depends. You can receive it in flour, the traditional flour that people see people smoke. We also have tinctures, which are things that you can put drops under your tongue. We have oils that you can either vape, waxes that you can vape. We have oils that you can use as a consumable, so for food products. We have butters that we can make. There's all kinds of food products. There are gummy bears, brownies. I mean, anything you can think of, cookies. And actually, the heavier the sugar content, the better it is for the THC, the bottom of the molecule. So it's.
But there is CBD oil.
Yes.
And you don't have to have a prescription for it. It's you can buy it online.
It's the non-psychoactive portion
so
of.
So there's no THC in it.
Now I can't say that to be true because I've been reading reports in the last few weeks, in fact, in which they've tested several CBD products and they had much more than just a trace amount of THC. But I'm glad you brought that up because there are two components to cannabis. There's THC, which is a psychoactive compound, and the CBD, which is a cannabinoid. The cannabinoid is which we found to be very effective in treating children with epilepsy, for example.
Right.
So parents, they don't want their child high, they just want the seizures controlled. So what you do is you get something that has a very high concentration of CBD and very trace amounts of THC. But it's going to still have trace amounts of THC even in a heavy CBD. So one of the strains that's very popular that people know of is something called Charlotte's Web, and that was specifically created for epileptic children. Doesn't work for all epileptic children, but there are a set of children that this has worked well for. And so but this is a reason why we need to do more research. So that we can develop even better products, so that we can develop pills. One of the problems that we have with the edibles is the time that it takes for it to take effect. Certain edibles may take 30 to 45 minutes to an hour to actually take effect. That's a long time to wait when you're in pain or you have a condition. And additionally, that's also dangerous in some respects because the patient sometimes overdoses, because they haven't felt an effect after 20 minutes or 30 minutes and they go, okay, I'll have more. And it's kind of a little bit of a joke, but the rule of thumb is you can always eat more, you can never eat less.
Oh, yeah,
So you have to keep that in mind when you're dealing with edible products, is that you can always eat more later, but you can never eat less later than you've already eaten. Now you're on the ride and get out portion of the show.
Yeah, right, and that's not good, yeah.
But in the history of medical cannabis, I have never heard of anyone ODing and dying off of medical cannabis. In the history of mankind, not once. Now, people will tell stories of someone got into a car accident and died, and they find that they had, in their bloodstream, but please remember that this stays in your system 30 to 45 days. So someone could have smoked cannabis a month ago,
Really?
get into a car accident a month later, and still have traces of cannabis in their system.
But
Whereas
it's
some
not
of the other drugs,
active.
no, not at all. I mean, for
takes
most
that long
people,
to clear.
for most people, you know, if you're, it depends upon what form you're taking cannabis in and what the strength of that dose is, but it's not much more than a 4-hour or so, just like most other drugs. That's why you
Yeah.
have to take your drugs
Every
3 or
couple
4
hours,
times
yeah.
because they only work for so
Yeah.
long.
So back to the over-the-counter
CBD?
CBD oils. I mean,
It's
so
become very popular.
do they work? Or, I mean, but because nobody knows what doses to take.
Well,
There's no dosage on
it's
it.
supposed to be good for certain things, and as I said earlier, I mean, it shows great promise with epileptic children.
The over-the-counter CBD.
No, not over the counter. I'm talking about Charlotte's Web and other ones that
Yeah.
we've developed in the medical cannabis
No, I'm not
space.
talking about the medical.
You're talking about the unregulated,
I'm talking about unregulated
and
you
I'm
can buy
uncomfortable talking
online.
about the unregulated market because
Okay.
it's just that,
It's just that.
and you
yeah.
don't know what you're
You
getting.
don't know what you're getting. Okay.
And that's why I say that it's important for states to be bold and actually being bold. You're protecting your citizens.
there any
It's
new-
your responsibility to set up this program properly and to make sure that there are safeguards. So we test. So we have, you know, the independent testing labs, so that all patients and caregivers in the state of Maryland, every time they walk into a dispensary, they can feel confident that their government has ensured that the product that you're getting is exactly what it says on that. Because everything is labeled
Right.
too. So the patient knows I'm getting cherry pie, it's an indica, it's this THC, it's blah, blah, blah. And this is a date and the place that it came from.
Anything new on the horizon is in legislation or anything?
Absolutely. Next week, as a matter of fact, on June 25th, the Maryland, well, they call it marijuana. I don't like using the M word, but it's the Cannabis Legalization Work Group. And I'll tell you the story behind that. But we finally put together a group of lawmakers to look at how we move to an adult use program, so a tax and regulatory framework, so that anyone over 21 years old can just go into a store, show their driver's license or other government ID, and be able to purchase their cannabis the same way they do in, I don't know, 12 other states in the union. And there are many other states that are looking and going in that direction as well. There's heavy pushback from law enforcement, for example. It's unfortunate. We believe that the medical program has really been working, and also combining that with decriminalization has helped us to. It's helped us to address some of the issues that we have with aggressive police stops, and especially when it comes to people of color. So I think that's been helpful in terms of saying, look, we're not going to be prosecuting small amounts of cannabis and paraphernalia. That's just like, it's just a waste of our time, a waste of our resources, and we have bigger fish to fry. And it also takes, I mean, we have the situation in Baltimore City. I mean, it can't be ignored. Right now, the Baltimore Sun is running a series of stories on the gun task force there and the problems and the corruption. And it's stories that inner city folks have told for years, and not just in Baltimore City, all across the country in urban areas. And we need to get away from that. We have lots of great law enforcement folks that do great jobs every day. My nephew is a police officer, so I take it very, very seriously. I worked in law enforcement myself in the state's attorney's office. So we all take law enforcement very seriously, and we all appreciate the job the guys and gals in Blue do.
They work, yes, they do.
We absolutely appreciate it. But we also are realistic enough to say that there are some of you who do not do the right thing, and we have to call that out. And we have to also make sure that we have policies and laws in place in our society to protect our vulnerable citizens. So this has been...
Let me see if I heard this right, because I may not have. So you said that what's on the horizon is talking about getting a card so you can show you're 21 and you can buy your marijuana.
Adult use.
Adult use, like a liquor store.
Just anybody can, as long as you're over 21, anyone can purchase. Not just medical.
Not medical. Just regular.
Just
so
regular
it'd be like
adult use.
going to the liquor store
Precisely.
and showing I'm 21.
Exactly. But by the same token, we have to be very careful.
That would be a different dispensary then.
Well, it doesn't have to be necessarily a different dispensary. It could be different products, though. Okay. So the way, I mean, I don't know how Maryland's going to address it. Like I said, we're not going to start talking about this until next week.
Okay.
We've had bills in place for the last several years, just to get the conversation going. But I really think that this group that the Speaker and the President put together, really, they're going to drill down and really try to figure out what will a legal program look like to Maryland.
That's where I think you're going to get some pushback from your residents. One, it's one thing to be medical and be a dispensary. It's another when you're coming to say, hey, my friends and I want to get high. Bang, here, look at my card. I'm 21. Let me get this and this. I think that's maybe where you'll get a lot of pushback. So
I agree with you.
You're going to
it's not going to necessarily
make it an acceptable part of your community.
Well, this is, again, I think attitudes are changing. I like to say that cannabis is the new gay. I had the privilege of working on marriage equality for the first 7 years of my lobbying career, and very proud the Supreme Court made it the law of the land. I very much see cannabis policy through that exact same lens. If you had told me 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that anyone, even in Mississippi or Missouri, if you love somebody, you can marry them. It didn't matter if they were of the same sex. I would have thought you were crazy. There was no way we were going to get there. If you would have told me we were going to have an African-American president in my lifetime, I was going to tell you you're crazy. There was no way we were going to get there. And so I see this very much because I wouldn't have imagined that we were going to have 30 some odd states that would have medical cannabis and 12 that would have adult use in my lifetime. And I'm looking at my home state and I'm going, if they could do it everywhere else, we can certainly get that done here. And it's good public policy. That's what people are not going to be able to escape, that is good public policy. And guess what? People are already doing this, so you need to regulate it. You don't want the Wild West.
Well, what do you think, again, this is a whole other show, what do you think that would do to the war on drugs and the cartels and
well, we've already seen some effects.
Yeah.
So, you kind of have to take what you're going to get. So, in Mexico, we have a rise in kidnapping since there is less. I don't mean it. I don't make light of that at all. But you're going to have shifts, and the cartels will do something else. I don't feel bad for the cartels losing revenue. As a matter of fact, that's what we want to do. Is we want to crush the black market. We want to bring it into the light, but we want to do it fairly. And I will say this. The war on drugs, I believe, was mostly a war on communities of color. And we have so many people behind bars for using these substances.
Absolutely.
And now we're legalizing, and we're not going to let them participate in the legal side of it. That is not good. So I am pleased that Maryland is the first state in the union to actually put diversity into the application and make it a scoreable part of the application. I believe that we need to do something similar when we do legalization, but I think that we have to do it smartly. We have to have tiered licenses the same way we do in other areas so that you have people competing in the same category. I don't want to have somebody who is going to try to build a 100,000 square foot facility competing with somebody who wants to build a 5,000 square foot facility. These are two completely different groups. These people are well financed, they got hedge funds and blah, blah, blah. And this is a mom and pop that, sees an opportunity and wants to put my kids through college and leave them something as a legacy. Both people should be able to participate in this industry fairly, and we do it in everything else. I mean, we have Budweiser, which is the king of beers, 51% market share, but we have Fat Tire too, and other ones who are making money and sending their kids to college and existing.
But the person who wants to build the 100,000 square foot facility and the person who wants to build the 5,000 square foot facility are still regulated the same.
Well, they're also having to compete. They're competing for the same license, and that is unfair. That's why we should tier it. You should have a license category, Class A, 0 to 5,000, Class B, 5,001 to 15,000 maybe, and then 15,000 to 50, and then 50 to 100,000 as a fourth one.
But the growing and processing and distribution would still be regulated.
It would still be regulated.
same way.
Everyone would have to do the same things, but competing for the license, because what I'm saying is
yeah.
that the person who's the mom and pop who has a net worth of $740,000, which is darn
Right.
good, and they work their lives off to get that, do not compete against this guy over here who alone is worth
Right.
$200 million,
Right.
and he's going to be working with his other friends
And so
that
their
are equal.
thought is, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to
Well,
get a license.
and look at the two
because
of them.
yeah.
I mean, like, you can't compete against this
Yeah.
guy. You can compete if it were a level playing field and you had the opportunity to get in there, but we're not giving you that opportunity because we're making it just
So
viable
all
for the
this
big.
comes up next week, all the
Well,
discussions.
they're going to start slow. they're going to get into it
I'd
slowly.
like to be a fly on the wall.
The agenda that I saw for next week is just kind of looking at other states that have done it, and then our experience here with the medical cannabis program. But that was really important for us to establish a medical cannabis program, not have any major problems or issues, so that we can demonstrate to the state and the legislators and residents that this program has largely operated and you don't even know it exists. People have been buying, I mean, people's bought over $100 million worth of cannabis in like 10 months last year, and not one person in Maryland was affected. Not one
Now,
person was impacted.
Not only did they purchase it, but they paid tax on it?
They didn't because it's medicine.
Because it's medicine.
So we don't do sales tax. Of course, there's income tax for the owners
But
of
there's
these
income
businesses.
tax.
There's income tax, of course, and of course, you know, the economy goes around because, as I said earlier, I have to hire a lawyer, I have to hire an accountant, I have to have a security person, I have to have cameras, I have to have lighting, I have to, you know, so everybody benefits from this. You know, if I'm down in Charles County, I'm calling SMECO. If I'm up here, I'm calling Pepco. If I'm over there, I'm calling BG&E. Everybody is a part of this thing happening.
You know, the important, to me, the important thing is, if it's in my community, I don't want it in my face, and I want it providing jobs and security for people. If we're going to say, we got to get out of the not in my backyard.
The NIMBY.
Yeah, we got to get away from that because
Well, I think it's getting
the
better,
world
and
goes around.
I think as
How
we
long
continue.
have we had the
You've only had
dispensary
the one
bully?
here for about 6 months, but again, problem-free.
I
And we've
haven't heard
had
anything.
3 years of almost 3 years of experience, and as I said, no diversion, no major problems, no break-ins, none of those things. And so I'm hopeful that we'll continue this path, and residents will become a little bit more comfortable as they see no problems.
Well, we have just about a minute left. Is there anything you want to wrap up with?
You know, Carrington and Associates is really proud to have won more licenses in the state of Maryland around the medical cannabis license process than any other group. We're looking forward to engaging in the legalization process and helping clients with that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
This has been eye-opening, and I think we could probably do a third show.
I think we could. I look forward to you
Yeah.
inviting me back.
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so good to see you again.
Really good to see you as well.
I can't believe we are so out of time. We
My
have
goodness.
20 seconds, and that was it. And
An
still,
hour went by.
And still, there's a
Well, because I
million
have
more
a,
questions. Yeah.
because you and me could talk all day.
I know it. But this was really
This was great.
fascinating. I think that it helped dispel some myths.
I hope so. I really do.
Right.
I mean, people are going to, if you don't give them the information, they're going to make up stuff on their
make it
own.
up, yeah.
They're going to make up things on their
Yeah.
own. So.
They absolutely do. He'll tell us in a minute when we can.
No, I just did a town hall last night in Brentwood, same topic area. And, you know, residents had questions, and, you know, it's interesting to hear, you know, as someone, I mean, I go all over the country doing this, and I've been doing this for years now, so everything kind of sounds like, you know, the